You know, I didn't think I would be talking about Ethan Klein, the H3 podcast, so soon yet again on this channel, but Ethan said something so absurd, so ridiculous. It was actually a call for terroristic violence, so we have to discuss it. We have to discuss how he's so upset about getting a community guideline strike for something that if I even hinted at, I would have been banned from YouTube for, just like many other not as well connected people would have been banned from YouTube. And we got to talk about how ridiculous his underlying premise is and how he's trying to back away and claim that he was joking. But this video, like my other videos, is in fact sponsored, so we're going to throw it over to the sponsor, then we're going to come back over here and discuss Ethan Klein's ridiculous call to violence. Drones used to just be toys. I know this for a fact because I used to sell them at the mall when I was 19 years old and they were nothing special. But now, they're major business investments. If you're a YouTube vlogger, if you're making a top tier big budget movie for a major studio, or if you're just a serious enthusiast, you want to get yourself a drone. And one of the drones that I recommend is this tactical drone right here. You see, this drone actually shoots in 4K. It shoots up to 60 frames per second, which means you can get slow motion. And right now, if you go to flyminidrone.com, you can get it for 50% off. Get your foot in the industry, learn to fly a drone that actually shoots 4K. Flyminidrone.com. Let's give it a test flight. So I've talked about multiple different times on this channel how the number one crime of Ethan Klein's podcast is that it is criminally boring. It is not entertaining, it's not interesting, and it's a perfect example of somebody who was entertaining in small doses going to this broader platform where they don't have the script, they don't have the aid of editing done by his wife, and we see who this person actually is. And what we discover from Ethan Klein is that he's essentially your very basic lefty person. He's heavily influenced by lefty creators. He's doing a podcast with Cenk's nephew, and you could tell by his statements related to the NRA and on the gun issue that Cenk's nephew is really talking through Ethan Klein's mouth. And of course, the culmination of somebody hanging around Cenk's nephew for far too long is ever increasing stupid takes and ever increasing calls to violence, because Cenk's nephew has repeatedly called for violence in the past and gotten away with it. So without further ado, let's play the clip of Ethan Klein calling for terrorism against the National Rifle Association.
Do we have any insight into what they're actually talking about there at the NRA meeting that's today in Texas? Someone should bomb that building.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. That's pretty not good. If you are a conservative and you called for something similar to that on the internet.com, on any of these social media platforms, you would be banned. The FBI would be visiting your house, and you would be facing the consequences of not being able to have payment processors or any forms of banking, because there is clearly and obviously double standards when it comes to the left and the right. And Ethan, by the way, to his credit, actually realized how bad this take was immediately after and started backpedaling away from it, saying, well, I'm not really calling for violence, don't worry about it, and I would be remiss to not play the whole clip for you guys right here on the internet so you can understand that even he understood that he totally crossed the line there by telling his followers and encouraging his followers to target one of his political opponents.
It was good. Do we have any insight into what they're actually talking about there at the NRA meeting that's today in Texas? Someone should bomb that building. Okay,
Don't.
I'll roll that back.
Roll that back immediately.
Everything but violence.
Just
So
rewind
that's
time.
And had things just been left there after Ethan got a community guideline strike from YouTube, I would have been like, okay, whatever. I'm not really going to get into this story. However, Ethan Klein did get a community guideline strike, and rather than acknowledging that he crossed the line, that he's turning up the temperature in the United States of America, that he's directing more hate and more violence as an answer to hate and violence, Ethan decided to weasel out of it by saying, oh, I was just joking, and you conservatives, you care more about my jokes than you do about dead kids. Dead kids, dead kids, dead kids, and you guys are targeting my jokes, which of course, ironically, is Ethan Klein trying to hide behind dead children that he supposedly cares harder about than anybody else in the United States of America in order to protect his YouTube channel and in order to protect his stupid podcast. Now, of course, Ethan has received a ton of condemnation for this call to violence, and he's trying to get out of it in any way possible, but in reality, what people are not harping on on as much as they should is how wrong Ethan's fundamental premise is, and how when you take Ethan's fundamental premise at face value, this call to violence is actually the logical implication from what he espouses on his channel. So the left is obsessed with the NRA. They talk nonstop about how all these deaths they want to lay at the feet of the NRA, because the NRA is this gun lobby, and the NRA supposedly is in favor of killing children. Now, first and foremost, they're fundamentally getting the gun issue wrong. We talked about multiple different times on this channel how Michael Bloomberg is behind the majority of the anti-gun groups in this nation. Everytown USA is a Michael Bloomberg group. Mothers Against Gun Violence is a Michael Bloomberg group. Mayors Against Gun Violence is a Michael Bloomberg group. And Michael Bloomberg has a ton of money. He's a multi-billionaire, one of the richest men in the United States of America, so obviously he has the capability to outspend the fledgling NRA, who is often reporting local bankruptcies and is strapped for cash in this nation. They're also being targeted politically by the New York State Attorney General for political purposes and all of that jazz. So what we actually have here is a group that is spending less money on one side of an issue comparatively to the people on the other side of the issue, but supposedly they're the ones running the show. Supposedly they're the ones corrupting the politicians who just want those sweet campaign bribes in order to do what is needed to be done by the bidding of the NRA. But the thing is, obviously this doesn't make sense. Obviously, if the politicians were just going where the money went, we would have a big gun ban in the nation, because that's what Michael Bloomberg is ultimately in favor of. People talk about common sense gun control regulations. They talk about how we need background checks, even though the shooter in the instance that Ethan is freaking out about did in fact pass a background check. So the idea that you're going to keep throwing that proposal in perpetuity, even though we have a federally licensed firearm dealership that ran a background check in this instant, doesn't make a lot of sense. Not that these people know anything about gun-related policy in the first place. This is what happens when you're dealing with somebody with an immature, childish view of American politics. And a lot of people on the left wing, and Ethan is just somebody who distills the most basic NPC version of left-wing takes, have this immature view of politics. The NRA spends money on this side of the issue, therefore the NRA must be controlling everything related to this side of the issue. But in reality, the reason why the gun people, the pro-Second Amendment people, win on legislation after legislation is because of democracy. It is because of the voters. Because when you slice it up, when you look at people's priorities, when you compare the polls to how people rank the issues, which is what really matters, what you find out time and time again is that you cannot be elected as a Republican in 98% of this country unless you are pro-gun. And the reason for this is because the pro-gun people rank gun rights as their number one issue. So they vote based on this issue. On the contrast, the anti-gun people, the gun control people, the people who want to take away your Second Amendment liberties, rank it somewhere around 19th as their most important issue. And Ethan Klein is actually a part of this problem if he's the one who wants gun control. Because who did Ethan Klein support in the 2020 and in the 2016 Democratic primaries? One Bernie Sanders. What was one of the attacks that the left leveled against Bernie Sanders is that comparatively to Joe Biden, comparatively to Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders actually had a D- rating from the NRA. And the reason why is because Bernie Sanders, the socialist far leftist, was running in the state of Vermont. And in the state of Vermont, people like their guns. So Bernie Sanders actually voted against laws that were proposed to push gun control. Hillary Clinton, being a New York senator, voted in favor of every gun control proposal that she actually had. Hillary Clinton even voted for the ability to sue gun manufacturers when their products work perfectly, something that cannot be done against any other industry in this country. You see, normally if there's a malfunction in a product, if a product is advertised in a deceptive way, or all the other things that can go wrong when a product comes to market, you can sue the manufacturer. However, when somebody uses a product as intended for nefarious purposes, typically we associate responsibility with that individual. A perfect example of this is that if you have a brake issue in a car, then you can sue General Motors or Honda or whatever manufacturer was behind that car. However, if you have an incident like we saw saw in Waukesha, where somebody drives a vehicle into a group of people, uses the car in a way that it's not intended, but the car is actually functioning as designed, you're not able to sue the manufacturer of that vehicle. Hillary Clinton voted in favor of suing gun manufacturers when their product function in the way that it's supposed to function, which is insane. It's horribly radical. It was a way to get rid of the Second Amendment altogether, and Bernie Sanders voted against it. If you're one of these anti-gun people who wants more gun control in the nation, then you have to prioritize that in the ballot box when you're actually voting for candidates. Joe Biden, another example of this. He was definitely more pro-gun control than Bernie Sanders. We talked about Bernie's history on guns just now. He has a D- rating. Biden and Clinton had lower rankings from the NRA. Yet these people supported Bernie Sanders because, unlike the gun people, they do not prioritize gun control as one of their chief issues. So you can trot out whatever stupid poll that says most people are in favor of common sense gun control in a top line poll. You can say, wow, the majority is on the side, but the NRA is spending all this money and Republicans won't vote that way. But in reality, it is people on the left, just like Ethan Klein, just like Cenk's nephew, that don't prioritize this issue and wonder why they never get movement in their direction. The gun people vote for people who are pro-gun. That is their deal-breaking issue. They're much like the abortion people who won't vote for somebody who is not objectively and obviously and openly pro-life. This is the way that our system works. You have issues, you have polls and all that, but fundamentally the issue that decides elections, the issue that is going to change whether or not you're going to get any votes or lose any votes, is going to be what's implemented in this country. And all the other issues that people don't vote on are the ones that are more vulnerable to corruption. All the other issues that people don't pay attention to are the ones that you end up getting packaged in with the deal, because most people prioritize their number one issue, maybe their number two issue, and after that, they kind of let the chips fall where they may. And Ethan Klein, Cenk's nephew, all these lefties are among that. Cenk Uygur, huge gun grabber, also supported Bernie Sanders vociferously, even though Hillary Clinton is objectively a huge gun grabber and more closely related to Cenk on this policy than any other candidate in that Democratic primary. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is that when you accept this wrong-headed premise, when you accept the left's arguments, or at least the fact that they believe those arguments at face value, you ultimately end up realizing that the logical conclusion of their premises is what Ethan threatened, or what Ethan called for in this scenario. Because one of the things that really upset me, and it upset a lot of people across the political spectrum, was the lack of action, or the lack of timely action from the police department in Texas. This is because when somebody is killing children, you want officers to burst in, you want people with guns to burst in and stop the threat by any means necessary. So if you're somebody who feels that way about the shooter, because the shooter is actively killing people, actively killing children, and then you apply that to the NRA, the organization, obviously it follows logically that you would want similar outcomes for the people at the NRA. Remember, these are people who don't lay the responsibility at the feet of the criminal, they lay the responsibility at the feet of the NRA. This is why fundamentally, no matter what Ethan says about how he was joking, how he was kidding, when he starts saying that the NRA and the Republicans are responsible for dead kids, that obviously leads people to believe on its own that maybe they need to take action against the people who are responsible for killing those kids. And when you acknowledge that that is the logical implication of Ethan's statements, of the left-wing statements about the NRA as an organization, you understand that the only thing Ethan did wrong, and the reason why he's not going to lose a shred of his left-wing support over this, is say the quiet part out loud. Is say the thing that people are actually implying when they lay responsibility for violence at the feet of the NRA in actual words, because you're not supposed to go beyond implication, you're just supposed to put the thought out there, and then hopefully at some point somebody will act on behalf of the thoughts of the violent rhetoric that you are putting forward into the press. What Ethan's doing fundamentally, even beyond explicitly threatening or calling for violence against the NRA, is contributing to a narrative that forwards and increases the chances of violence against the NRA. What the left was obsessed about, if you guys remember way back when during the Trump administration, was this idea of stochastic terrorism. They said you needed to censor the internet because what people are doing is throwing all these ideas out there, and even though they're not directly calling for violence, that's going to activate some radical, some fringe person, and that will ultimately lead to violence. And we saw the effects of this when people were calling the Border Patrol camps, when the Border Patrol was detaining the minors, concentration camps. That ultimately led to an Antifa radical who tried to shoot up the place. And we're seeing the same exact stochastic terrorism, again by their own definition, coming from the left wing in terms of the NRA. The thing is, they have no standards but double standards, so nobody on the left wing will call out how they're letting their political rhetoric get completely out of hand. So again, fundamentally, Ethan Klein was not joking. Again, fundamentally, Ethan Klein's underlying premises actually logically lead to him calling for violence, because when you're saying one group is responsible for killing all the kids, this is the logical implication. Now, I do want to say that Ethan Klein has talked about how he's gotten a lot of anti-Semitic hate against him, and this is ridiculous. You people are the ones that ruin the internet for everybody, and you're not going to convince anybody by going all anti-Semitic on them. Ethan Klein, first of all, is an atheist. He may be Jewish by heritage, but I'm also an atheist. The idea that because he and I fall under the same category of atheists, therefore that is the driving factor beyond our beliefs is absurd, and the same is true for his Jewish heritage. You're not convincing anybody in that. You're a total dork and a total clown if you're going after him in this way, and you're actually convincing him to double down on these beliefs, by the way, that he's repeating from Cenk's nephew, also an atheist and a former Muslim, and you're blaming it all on his Judaism. It's absurd in every possible way. It does not help anything or anyone, and you really need to cut it out. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like this video, show me by leaving a like. You subscribe for more content. Follow me on all my social medias. Support me via the support links in the description box of this video. This has been me talking about Ethan Klein calling for violence. Till next time.